Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are watching and or listening. I'm Arnold Lehman, Senior Advisor at Philips, and today I want to welcome you to the fourth episode in 2021 of Art Speaks, our monthly series of discussions on issues critical to art museums, to artists, art galleries, and collectors. Indeed, today our program will focus on artists. I can't say how great a pleasure it is today to introduce my four distinguished panelists from across the country, actually from across the world today. And in alpha order, they will be Sanford Biggers, KAWS, Jennifer Rubell, and Leo Villareal. As the biographies of their important accomplishments are posted on the program's events page, I will only briefly introduce them, as we are all really eager to get to conversation, knowing that these four artists and friends certainly have a lot to say. Sanford Biggers' work is an interplay of narrative, perspective, and history that speaks to current social, political, and economic issues. His diverse practice positions him as a collaborator with the past through explorations of often overlooked cultural and political narratives from American history. Sanford was raised in LA and currently lives and works in New York City. The recipient of numerous awards, most recently, Sanford was appointed the 2021-2022 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Visiting Professor and Scholar in the MIT Department of Architecture. Earlier, he received the prestigious Guggenheim Fellowship, the Creative Capital Award in the Visual Arts, the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award, the Rome Prize in Visual Arts, without ever inviting me to Rome. And he was inducted into the New York Foundation for the Arts Hall of Fame. Sanford's work is in the permanent collections of museums across the country, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Barnes Foundation, the Walker Arts Center, the Whitney Museum, I'm proud to say the Brooklyn Museum, the Studio Museum, and the National Museum of African American History and Culture. On May 5th, Sanford debuted Oracle, a monumental bronze sculpture on Fifth Avenue in Rockefeller Center, along with a multimedia public art exhibition throughout the center presented by the Art Production Fund. Unfortunately, for our viewers today who hadn't seen it, the exhibition closed last week, but it was spectacular. KAWS engages audience beyond the museums and galleries in which he regularly exhibits. His prolific body of work straddles the worlds of art and design to include painting, murals, graphic and production design, street art, and large-scale sculpture. Over the last 2 decades, KAWS's work consistently shows both his formal agility as an artist as well as underlying wit, irreverence, and affection for our time. KAWS often appropriates and draws inspiration from pop culture animations, forming a unique artistic vocabulary across mediums. His cast of hybrid cartoon characters are the strongest examples, I think, of exploration of humanity. As seen in his collaborations with global brands, KAWS's imagery possesses a sophisticated humor and revels in a thoughtful interplay with consumer products, establishing him as a uniquely prominent artist and influence in today's culture. KAWS, aka Brian Donnelly, was born in Jersey City and lives and works in Brooklyn. He has exhibited extensively, most recently at the Brooklyn Museum and earlier at the National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne, Australia, the Fire Station in Qatar, and the Yuz Museum in Shanghai. Indeed, today, KAWS is joining us from Tokyo, where he is about to open his newest exhibition at the Mori Art Center and remains under house arrest right now. I'm joking. He's in quarantine. Jennifer Rubell received a BA in Fine Arts from Harvard and lives and works in New York. She is a conceptual artist who works in a wide variety of participatory mediums, ranging from interactive sculpture, painting, installation, and video to food performance. Her pieces often prompt viewers to violate the boundaries associated with art viewing by touching, inhabiting. I did one that once and almost couldn't get out, consuming or destroying the object. This exploding of the traditional viewer artwork relationship scrambles all kinds of seemingly fixed dualities: passivity, control, creation, consumption, permanence, ephemerality, participation, observation, and safety, danger. Jennifer's performances and work have been seen widely in various spaces around the world, and she continues to create site-specific participatory work inspired by everything from Ivanka Trump to the Utrecht Soccer Club. Her performances and exhibitions have included landscapes at Fondation Byler in Basel, Old Fashioned at the LA County Museum of Art, Made in Texas and Nutcrackers at the Dallas Contemporary, and the Dupuy Triptych at the Saatchi Gallery, London, and Icons at the Brooklyn Museum. Leo Villareal is a light artist based in New York City and has exhibited throughout the world. He has work in museum permanent collections from MoMA to Naoshima Contemporary Art Museum in Kagawa, I never can pronounce it, in Japan, and I apologize, and back to the National Gallery of Art in Washington. Leo is perhaps most widely known for his permanent site-specific works, including Volume at the Dallas Cowboys headquarters in Texas, Buckyball for San Francisco's Exploratorium, Multiverse at the National Gallery of Art, Diagonal Grid in Istanbul, Stars for the Brooklyn Academy of Music, and March 2013, Leo inaugurated the Bay Lights, a monumental 1.8-mile installation of 25,000 white LED lights on San Francisco's Bay Bridge. And in April 2021, Leo completed Illuminated River, which unites 9 bridges in central London into a single monumental work of public art. Leo was born in Albuquerque, grew up in El Paso and in Juarez, Mexico. He received a BA in sculpture from Yale and an MA in interactive telecommunications from NYU. Leo then moved to San Francisco to work at Paul Allen's private research lab in Palo Alto. Since 2004, Leo has served on a number of not-for-profit boards, including that of Ballroom, Marfa, and the Burning Man Project. Again, I am truly delighted that these 4 artists, these 4 particular artists, agreed to talk about a critical aspect of our art ecosystem, art making, and everything that goes with it, from where they are now to where they might be at the end of this decade. We'll talk about their commitment and experience as artists over the recent past and what they foresee in the immediate future. Welcome, everyone. Sanford, Brian, Jennifer, and Leo Villareal. I really appreciate it. I'm going to start by asking questions. Anyone can jump in. I'm going to address the first, basically to all of you, whoever wants to answer a question first. But if I don't get a volunteer, I'm just going to go right to someone. So during the past year and a half, with many of our lives essentially controlled by COVID, would you share with us if there was one issue during that time that affected you most directly as an artist? And was there a lesson to be learned from that particular experience? All right. Brian is smiling, so I'm going to go right to him.
Oh man, I should have kept the stone face.
You should have smiled. And you are still, Brian, by the way, it's 2:00 in the morning in Tokyo. So I'm really grateful for Brian's
participation. Thank you. No, it's fun. I wouldn't pass up a chance to chat with you. You know, I mean, like everybody, last year it was a super intense year. I mean, you know, me having 2 small children, that's really kind of what my energy went towards. You know, I was interested in making art and getting it out into the world, you know, in the ways that I could, whether it's through social media and, you know, different projects I can do out of my house. But the real focus, I think, last year was, family. And I don't know, I think it makes you as an artist reevaluate everything, to have a year like that, and kind of what's important and what is in your life that doesn't need to be. And, going forward, what can you put your energy into, and sort of how can you affect people?
I saw a lot of head shaking in agreement. Um, Sanford, you shook that last.
Yeah.
Also
Well,
got two small kids at home.
yeah. Well, I started with one small kid at home, and now I have two. So, an official coronial. Yeah, I think there's the displacement, and usually displacement. Meaning we left the city. I left my studio and was staying with my in-laws, and that type of displacement for me usually is a time to reflect and, like Brian was saying, just sort of reevaluate things. But with my daughter around and my in-laws and everybody, there was not much room to move or breathe. So you just have to slow your roll and be present and be part of that moment and enjoy family. It feeds, it gives you, and it nourishes you in such a way that I don't know if I would have had that if I were at my normal breakneck speed in the studio. So I think some of that reflective time was probably good. It was difficult. I'm still trying to figure out how to get my practice back up in terms of the way it was before. I also had a lot of projects, as I'm sure many of you did, that got stalled and postponed. And some of that was frustrating. Some of that was actually really satisfying. I was definitely happy to not be at that breakneck speed. I think we all needed a break. I think the world needs a break from that. And I hope we don't jump right back into it as if we've learned nothing in the last year. But yeah, so those are some of my experiences.
Jennifer, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I mean, if you have young kids, this year, they're always a focus of your life. This year, it was, you're playing all the roles. First of all, you appreciate so much how in normal times, there are so many people helping you to raise your kids. They're teachers, everybody, anybody who's teaching them a sport or whatever. And suddenly you are their source of humanity. You are their social life, you're their teacher. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, in a way, it's sort of like being an artist, that kind of where you do everything except applied to family life, and I have this big defect of just finding everything interesting. The world could be coming to an end, and my take on it is that it's really interesting. So yeah, that was my life. I also felt like the whole world was living the way I most like to live, which is in my box, thinking about everything and being really tuned into what I care about and not much else. I think for all of us, probably also the crushing reality of the suffering, it was a part of just a part of the experience, even if you weren't leaving your house, So many things at the same time.
Jennifer, would you remind me to come move in with you if the end of the world was near?
Let's do it.
So, yes, exactly. Anyway, I wanted to just skip ahead, if you don't mind, Leo, and go to the next question, which I'm going to start off with you. And that is, what do you see as, hold on, I'm losing my question. Here we go. What do you see as the major challenges facing you and your practice as an artist in the next year or two, and perhaps even in longer term? And do you think these are challenges that are the same for other artists, or because of what you do, it certainly is different, but what is that coming up?
Well, I think we're, like many of the artists here, forging kind of a new path and kind of expanding the boundaries of what art is and where art can go. And I've been very committed to public art for a long time, and see how important it is to take art, as much as I love museums and galleries, out to the people. And that's been incredibly exciting to see where it can go. And I think there's a huge opportunity for so many other artists to engage directly with the public, and find other ways of working, which I think is very exciting. It's certainly challenging to do these things. And it's not for the, it requires a lot of tenacity to go through all the hoops and to do these public works. But I think that it's sort of the golden age of these things. And so many cities want to activate themselves and bring themselves to life and do new things, so that there's tremendous opportunity. I guess my challenge is to stay focused on, what we're trying to do, because we have so many different things happening, from, a gallery practice with PACE to, architectural scale commissions. And most recently, I've started thinking about immersive experiences and working with Super Blue, which has started in Miami, and doing a development period to think about those sorts of experiences, which are, again, this other space, which is outside the museum, and again, engaging people in cities that maybe don't have a museum. So it's all wide open, and it's exciting but challenging. But I think there's a lot of possibilities, and artists have a really important role to play.
Anyone else think this is the golden age of public art? I'd love to believe that. I really would love to believe that.
I mean, I think there's a lot of energy and opportunity. There has been, but really, when you're forced into a year like last year, it just makes you appreciate the, having work in the public and having that sort of gathering space, like people can come and look and, not have to be just in a gallery or a museum setting.
Brian, is there associated with your museum exhibition, is there anything outdoors in Tokyo that's part of that?
Actually, I work with this company Acute in London, and we do augmented reality work. We had worked on it actually 2 years prior to the world locking down. So we launched on March 12th. And then with Apple, we did this big launch, and then March 13th, the world shut down. So had it not, there would be, exhibitions in, I think it was like 13 countries we had works. But yeah, so around the Mori, we'll have some outdoor works that'll be, just augmented reality. You can find it through your app, similar to what we have at the High Line at the moment.
Oh, that's great. Jennifer? You had a big smile when you said, when I said golden age.
Oh, public sculpture. No, I was just thinking about, how this time has affected my work, the question you originally asked. And my work is entirely participatory. That means it exists when humans can touch it and touch each other. So this has been a time where that just doesn't exist. And in a way, it's interesting because I've always had a heightened sensitivity about the preciousness of human beings interacting with each other for whatever reason. And now the whole world kind of feels the specialness and the privilege of that happening. And so now, as people are moving out, hopefully in some countries, moving toward interacting again, it's a time when everybody's dying to interact, like Leo mentioned, Super Blue. Everybody wants things where they're with each other. And so it's really exciting. It's an exciting time on that front.
Well, this one question I have to end with Sanford, because you just put it all out there at Rockefeller Center. And the biggest problem, I thought, was the traffic congestion in front of it, everybody stopping. And the traffic, I didn't realize it, and the traffic backed up to like 57th Street. So you were being cursed without even knowing who you were because of what you did. So Rockefeller Center.
Well, I think that speaks to the desire for people to be in communal spaces where they can experience something, but have, be outside as well, to see something different in their work, on the street level that might be challenging or brings up issues that you might not have normally seen in public works before. I think we're at a time now where there's a lot more that you can do in the public sphere that's acceptable. So in that respect, I do think it's the golden age. And I also like the idea that you can add augmented reality and all these various technological aspects, which I also had involved with the project at Rock Center. because not only do people who are in that environment get to experience it, but people who are not in that environment, who are not even in that country, can get some aspect of it too. So it expands our notion of what community is. And I think it's a time where everyone is sort of thirsty for that, and the potential for what that can bring in terms of just larger social networks is pretty incredible.
Yeah, so we're all looking forward to touching one another a lot. I'm not joking when I said that, but getting out there, it's so important. We're in this little town out here in Maine, and people who I barely know come up to me at the post office and want to start talking. We've been here for 100 years. No one talks to you in Maine. So it really is weird, but wonderful, delightful at the same time. Anyway, I'm going to kind of skip ahead to something. And so I was just wondering if you could separate out your viewpoint as an artist from, as you just spoke, from the complexity of everything that constantly bombards you every day. How would you simply describe the art world at this moment and your place in it? You already were talking about what you're concentrating on doing, but how would you describe the world in which this group right here, right now, all the artists we know, collectors, how would you describe the art world at this moment? Anyone want to attack that?
I mean, does anyone actually feel like they know what their place is in the art world?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that's a very good question, Brian.
I don't think, yeah, if I met somebody that was sure, I would be they'd be pretty suspect. I don't know. I think things are up for grabs. I think there's a lot of things, moving parts at the moment, and a lot of curtains have been pulled, and people are just seeing opportunities as, kind of empowering themselves to sort of take control of what they want to see made and what they want to put into the world. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to hear some other.
It feels like there's a lot of different avenues that artistic creation could manifest itself in right now. It's not relegated to strictly the quote unquote art world. There's so many different points of entry, I think, right now. And people are taking their own, using their own volition to figure that out through social media or pop-ups or whatever it might be. It's exciting. I think, everyone's footing has been a little bit loosened. I mean, there's all this other NFTs are happening, our reality's changed, and the way most people are understanding the art world has changed. So as far as knowing where my footing is, I literally have no idea. We haven't even got into the whole idea of the sort of socio-political aspect of social media and how that's changing the way people read and critique and talk about work. That's also something that we all have to contend with to some degree. I'm just happy to still be in a position where I am engaging with culture and art history and contemporary art as sort of like, let's say, the podium to have these conversations.
I like your comment, and it's very interesting. And I feel that way often about how people are responding to art, what they're saying, and how many more people are talking about it. But I'm at the same time, I'm kind of worried because I read a lot, and I have a sense that people, art critics and others, people who call themselves art critics, are not really getting what's happening. You have Leo, you're shaking. I always go with people shaking their heads to know if they have that same feeling.
You'd be like,
yeah, I think it's, to me, it feels a lot like the Wild West in some aspects of it, and artists kind of grabbing territory, and, so it feels like there's this, these new hybrid forms with the digital work and interactive things and immersive things. NFT world is like, this kind of gold rush, and exposes what a lot of other people think of is art. I mean, there's so many different art worlds and so many different perspectives that's, I think, causing some tension. You have generational things of kind of the old school way it worked that we all have a foot in, but then also this other new place that's going where people don't have the desire to possess or own things and want to have an experience. So I think it's very exciting, but again, back to the, it's challenging to define and to, sort of put blinders on and do your work. And I think that's what I end up reverting to, is just focus on the work, try to shut all this noise out and kind of use your instincts to kind of push things forward. And of course, we have to interact with these worlds and engage with exhibitions and all the things that we're doing. But I think staying centered is probably the most important thing, and taking care of yourself so that you can endure this, for the long haul.
Wow. Okay. I'm getting silence. Jennifer?
Well, I think the artists always come first. Like the artists come first in everything. So, when you ask about the state of the art world, to me, the way to really get a read on that, unless you're looking at the state of the art market, which, as far as I'm concerned, who cares? But
I'm not talking about that.
Right. So if you're looking at the state of the art world, the things artists need, the things artists are working on, the things they're craving, the things they're engaged with. I mean, everybody here is engaged with a broader public than what would normally be called the art world. And museums and institutions and, trickling down to galleries are going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to deal with the fact that artists want their work to be engaged with by humans of all kinds. And so they will adjust, because not just the artists will demand it, but the artwork will demand it. So, that I think, I don't know where we are, but to me, that's where we're going.
Okay. Well, let me skip then to the next question, but stick with you, Jennifer. The can you take just a minute to kind of go more deeply into your practice? I mean, for the people who are listening who don't know your work very well, tell all of us what you do. Tell them what you do.
I mean, I mostly operate inside of art institutions. So, I personally grew up essentially inside of the founding of an art institution. My family, the creation of the Rubell Museum happened, that my childhood and that they weren't parallel, they were the same thing. And having done that, my personal material has a lot to do with the institution, but not the institution of the Rubell Museum, the institution in general. And so I have a lot of kind of mixed feelings about all institutions of art. And my work is basically a means to give people permission and opportunity to engage with those institutions in ways that they usually can't and they're not supposed to. So in normal, like concrete language, that means that I'll create installations where people are breaking things, eating things, I especially enjoy destroying things. And food has been a huge medium for me, because the moment people see food, they feel like they can engage with it. So using it as a kind of sculptural medium that people engage with has been a huge part of what I do. Is that a good synopsis? I feel like I missed most of my work.
That's a very good synopsis. And I must add that it was food that brought us together.
Yes, absolutely. The food performance I did at the Brooklyn Museum remains one of my favorite things I've ever done.
And once you have a great meal, you never forget it.
That's it.
So the same question. Let me go back to Brian in terms of, everyone knows, well, not everyone, but most people know what you do, but talk a little more deeply as to what you do on a day-to-day basis when you're in the studio.
I mean, it could really be all over the place depending on what's in front of me. I've always been interested in working, in traditional mediums, painting and sculpture, but also very much into creating, sort of commercial objects and working with companies, and whether it's patterns or, right now I'm working, just have something coming with Sakai, as a Japanese company. And like, I love the process of meeting people who, you know, are experts at what they're doing, diving into their world and creating stuff together and then letting it disseminate out to people in a sort of very tangible way. And I feel like, you know, just from early on, I've always been interested in the communication aspect of work, like putting work on the street, putting work in front of people that aren't expecting to see it. And I feel the same way about, you know, product, whether it's the edition stuff that I do or the sort of clothing collaborations, at all sort of different ways of reaching people in a candid, intimate way. And, you know, then I could go back to really traditional, like large scale sculptures and painting and, you know, what kind of feeling does that get out of somebody when they're in front of one? So, you know, this last few weeks has really been focusing on getting all the ducks in a row with the show in Tokyo. And now that I'm here, and when I get back, I'll roll into the next.
And I have to add that Brian was telling me when we first came together that he's allowed from his hotel room to the museum and back to the hotel room, and not allowed to attend his own opening. But at least you'll see it before it opens, which is good, and then ship back on an airplane as fast as possible. That sounds like such a warm welcome, I have to tell you.
No, you know, I love Japan. I'll never pass an opportunity to visit this country. It's, you know, and especially seeing it in this sort of way, you know, I couldn't pass it up. So it's all interesting. It's all information. I know for sure this trip will feel a lot different than the other 40, 50 times I've been here.
Oh my goodness. Okay, practice, Sanford.
Yeah, so let's see if I can sum it up. I think I like making objects and paintings that are seductive and formal, but also problematic and bring up issues of history and identity and beauty and stories that may not have been disseminated in the normal historical research that people have or educations they get. So I deal with a lot of untold stories of American history, and within that, sometimes stories outside of the US, international history, unsung heroes, unrepresented groups, and some of their cultural inspirations are also embedded in my work. So a more concrete example would be the series of quilts that I've been painting on for the last decade or so that I call the Codex series. Of which I'm about to open a large exhibition of in Los Angeles at CAM at the end of July. It's around 60 or 70 paintings and drawings on found and used antique quilts. And another example is the Chimera series, which the Oracle that was at Rock Center is part of. And those are typically marble and now bronze works that are combines of Greco-Roman historical and classical sculptures, and with attributes from sculptures and masks from various regions throughout Africa, and putting them together to make, you know, sculptures that have their own gesture and personality and identity, but bring into question our understanding of objects and history, and even the syncretism between those objects and cultures, or the disparity between them, and that those relationships have been existing for thousands and thousands of years.
Wow. That's a
That was a mouthful.
and a very big task, and one that needs to really be done. One of the things that's going to take me to London, Leo, is to see your new work. I'm hoping I can get there sooner rather than later. But is it all wrapped up, all finished, everything together?
Yeah, we've completed 9 bridges of the project called Illuminated River, and it's been 5 years since I won an international competition to think about the Thames and its bridges and ways that they could be activated. So it's quite a challenging project in that these are very diverse group of bridges. Some are historic, you know, like Westminster Bridge, Waterloo Bridge, Some are very utilitarian, like Cannon Street, which is a rail bridge, all from different time periods, but all serving the same function of getting from A to B and getting over the Thames. So that was a lot to work with. But for me, it was really about learning and listening as much as possible, because I was coming at it, as an outsider into the middle of a thousands of year old city. And how could I augment what's there? So I studied the way these bridges have been illuminated, and thought about, what I'm adding, which is sequencing. So time, the element of motion. And so already the Thames itself is like a living thing that rises and falls 5 meters twice a day. There's so much kinetic activity around the bridges. And I thought, the illumination should reflect that energy and movement. So it's been a long process of studying and, doing a lot of work beforehand, and then sitting there on the banks of the Thames programming night after night. But for me, I'm artist first, but using custom software that we developed ourselves to work with the bridges night after night. And I don't know in advance what is going to result. So I'm interested in concepts of emergent behavior, artificial life, where you set up certain conditions and then let it happen. And you sort of improvise and eventually you reach a solution. But we were able to launch the project 2 months ago. The country was still, I went there, the country was still locked down. So I quarantined for 5 days and, worked from my balcony where I could see 4 bridges. Even though I was locked in, I could work every night. But was able to kind of show, be part of the reemergence of the city and the country and the world, with this public artwork that hopefully, activates the bridges and resonates and creates a focal point that everyone can see and observe. And it's just kind of built into the fabric of the city.
Which my question is, what's between the bridges? Which bridges are the ends of the project?
We worked with London Bridge all the way to Lambeth Bridge. So it includes Millennium between the Tate Modern and St. Paul's, and so modern bridges, historic bridges, but they all work as one artwork. So there are these interconnections between them. So they're linked through the sequencing and the programming.
So the best place to see all of this is at night on the Ferris wheel.
Yes, the Eye would be a great place to see it. And it's wonderful to be able to walk in London along the Thames. And there's so many different vantage points. So it's really about, changing the way people perceive the Thames. And, it's in line with what artists have been doing for hundreds of years, from, Turner and Whistler and Monet or Handel, who composed water music to be played on the Thames on barges for the king over 300 years ago. So it's tapping into these very old ideas, but using very contemporary materials.
Well, I have to tell you, it might overcome my claustrophobia and get me into the Eye, because thus far, no one or nothing could get me to go in it. But I'll get there. This is a really tough question. And I don't ever know whether to ask it or not, but all of you have been, have had spectacular places as artists. But I'd love to know how you would define success for you personally as an artist. And has there been some particular elements that sort of led up to that success? But what is success for an artist in today's world, or however you want to define it? Personally, is what I'm really interested in. Sanford, you look very, very
successful.
When I was teaching, I used to tell students all the time that it was really up to them to figure out what their measure of success was, because if they were judging that from externals, they would constantly be depressed. They would always be looking for something that they thought they may not have. So it would be more important to find their own version of success. And once they did that, they knew they were doing their work to the degree that they could and where to push it. And for me, it's sort of similar. I mean, success to me really is the ability to wake up another day and take on another project. And as the projects get larger, more expansive, then to me that is a measure of success. But it's also keeps me inspired and creative as an artist, because now that the scale gets bigger, okay, that changes some elements. And I feel like I've been training. All of us have been training for a long time to best meet these challenges. So that's one version of success for me. And as I mentioned before, just to have been able to do that for, professionally for the last couple of decades, and hopefully many more. It's a very privileged place to be, I think, to be able to go through the world expressing your thoughts that don't always jive with the mainstream and still have people respond to that. There's a lot of responsibility in that. And also another aspect for me, as I mentioned, teaching and sharing that with up and coming artists is also a degree of success too. If they are willing to listen to the words I say, and if I have some degree of advice I can give them, that's a success too. And it's also paying it forward so that the next generation can learn from my mistakes and successes.
Anyone else willing to tackle a personal definition of success? Uh-oh.
I mean, I think success is being able to make your work, period, so, but all of us to one degree or another have pretty big ambitions for the physical reality of our work. So being able to make that in the context, like my work depends on institutions embracing these kind of happenings that that are really demanding of the institution sometimes. Other artists, they need public space in order to make their work. You need money, you need resources, you need people behind it. So, I mean, I think being able to make the work, and then the other thing is people engaging with it on whatever level. To me, if you have those two things, all the other measures are like, who cares? All the other measures are like the measures everybody has in everybody's life about, winning and losing, and who cares? We all win, we all lose,
Okay. So despite success, let's go forward from that. I'd love to ask a question that you may not be willing to answer, but if you would share, has there ever been an instance of really bad judgment or just mistakes you've made along the way from art school or related to what you're currently doing? And believe me, everyone listening, whether they're artists or whatever, would certainly benefit to hear what these moments have taught you. Any really big bad judgments? I have to tell you, I've asked this question before and I've gotten the same response. No one jumps in, and I'm glad to move forward with it because it's a hard question to answer, especially if you haven't had a couple of weeks to think about it. But Leo, you're smiling. So has a bridge fallen down on you because your LEDs have exploded?
Fortunately not. We spend a lot of time working with engineers to ensure these things are safe. I think my biggest challenges have come from sort of depleting myself and being overly ambitious about how hard it is to do something. And I think early on in my career, things were much more sort of cowboy style, and I was wiring up things myself, and and it was not rooted in the reality of the complexity of what I was trying to do. Things that were creatively ambitious, but also using technology and programming and all these things. So I think after fortunately I was able to kind of like never have a total disaster. I mean, I remember being at the Armory Art Fair at 6 a.m. trying to fix a sculpture, and the VIP preview opens at 10 a.m. So those sorts of moments of sweating it out with my engineer friend, are things that I definitely never want to do again. But stressful. But I think as you get older, you realize you have to take care of yourself. You have to think these things ahead and find partners that can help you realize your work. And it's to everyone's benefit for these things to be successful. And, so I guess cutting it too close is the stress for me and the lesson I've learned.
Speaking of sweating it out, we made Leo turn off his fan. It must be 90 degrees in your studio right now. So thank you. Anyone else? Or I'm happy to move forward. Okay, I am moving forward. With the evolving nature of collecting and exhibitions by art museums and leading art galleries, which I think we all really hope reflects positive changes in our society. Has there been, with all of that going on for the last couple of years, has that had a significant effect on you as an artist? And now, while those words, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, are certainly extraordinary and meaningful words to so many of us today, do you see these growing commitments affecting changes in the culture of the American art community that will stick going forward and not just be a phase that everyone can say, okay, we've done it and let's move ahead? I know, Sanford, this is so important to you, and your work has been, all those years I was at the Brooklyn Museum, I walked by one of your great, very memorable objects that was teaching us a lesson about history. So that started a long time ago for you, but today, there a lot of catch up. And I'm just concerned more than anything that this is going to be permanent and not just something that's, here today and, we've done it, we're okay, everyone's friends. So are you willing to talk about that for a moment?
Well, yeah, I think my thoughts on that are pretty simple. I just think that the changes that people want to implement really have to happen on a foundational, economic, and educational level. It can't just be performative. It can't just be a blurb on a website or a post on social media that doesn't do anything. It really is about including these people in the boardrooms, including these people on the curatorial staff, directorial staff, education staffs, and so on. In addition to showing artists. One of my fears is, I share that same fear that some of this might be temporary. I want it to be permanent. I also fear that we are going through a correction right now. And as with what happens with most corrections, there's an extreme backlash. And there is the other side of that coin where the arguments and the contention gets so large from the groups that are now getting the voice that it ends up replicating the same system that we were trying to avoid in the first place. So I think it has to, this thing takes time, it takes wisdom, it takes a lot of conversation and really true willingness for everyone to participate and realize that the ecosystem has to become inclusive and it shouldn't favor just one or the other. And it's a very difficult task, but that's what really needs to happen.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. But this is, I'd like to be 5 years from now and be able to reflect back and to see where we stand. Brian?
Yeah, one could only hope that, the things that you're seeing today could kind of go along. I feel fortunate. I've always found that, my audience has been super diverse, and I don't know if it's from the different fields that I work within that kind of brings people that aren't normally attending galleries and museums to a museum. But, you could only kind of really do what you do. And I feel extremely lucky that it's been able to kind of reach and pull people together. A lot of times, like even, you know, when I do gallery shows, I hear that it's just mobbed with people that have never entered that gallery space before. And I like that. And, you know, especially when I first started showing, you know, I think that I had a lot of people that were so familiar with the work that you had these young kids going to galleries that knew more about what I was doing than the people behind the desk. And I felt like there was a nice sort of role reversal. I don't know, you know, I think definitely the more we can kind of pull people into new spaces, the better we all are.
Yeah, well, again, I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more. I'm going to change the pace for a minute. And I'm going to ask Jennifer this, but it's a kind of strange question. Since you do so many things already, but was there ever a different a time in your career when you wished you had a different artistic practice than you do? When you wished you were, oh, you know, I really should have been a painter, or anything. I mean, you paint, so that's not a that's
My
not.
paintings
But
are all about the, you know, it's like my paintings have my phone number on them and they're about the interaction of people calling me. So I don't know that I would classify myself as a paint. It's like the one medium that, you know, but
I didn't. Oh, wait. I didn't call you a painter.
no, I know.
You paint also.
Disclaimer up here. But are there other, first of all, I work in so many mediums already, and it's like every time I do a new project, I'm, you know, it's really about the participation. So the medium that happens in can be anything. But I will say, you know, I have this kind of work ethic where I want to accomplish something every single day. That's just a part of who I am. And during the pandemic, I was really frustrated because, you know, I couldn't be producing any of my participatory work. And so I was frustrated that I didn't have that sense of accomplishing something every day. And so I started writing in order to be able to like see something physical at the end of every day. And so yeah, that, I mean, writing is the other I've always written all the way through, but writing is probably the other medium that I would work in. There's no physical medium that I consider outside of my normal artistic practice.
And Leo, before you started lighting up cities, going all the way back, I mean, when I read about your career, your training has really been, without knowing, this is sort of headed in this direction. Was there a time when you said, "Whoa, you know, let's change direction here"?
I mean, I, you know, studied sculpture way back when as an undergrad at Yale, and you know, very much, you know, artist first, and was very, but wasn't sure what my materials would be. And around 1990, things like Photoshop started to come out, and virtual reality the first time around. I wanted to get my hands on those tools, but it was a much different world then, and you kind of had to be in an academic environment to even get access to these things. And I wasn't sure what I would do with those tools, and it took me until 1997 to make my first light sculpture. And then I didn't even think of it as an artwork. It was a utilitarian device so I could get back to my mobile home at night at Burning Man. So, you know, it's a very circuitous route for me to find these materials. But I do think that, you know, it's rooted in a lot of work I love, you know, Terrells and Flavins, but adding computation to the mix is something that, you know, is, so I found this new little area that I feel like has been, you know, really interesting territory to explore. But you always wonder about the paths that you didn't take. And I certainly think I could be a couple of different artists, but, you know, maybe some Aros Salavi sort of thing in the future. I have to have some other secret identity, or I don't know. We'll see.
I love that.
You already have your other secret identity. We'll never know.
Yes, it's true. It is true. We all do. We all do, I think. And anyone else want to jump into that? Or I have a couple of last questions, but I think this always tells me a lot, and that is um, if there was no barrier, if there was no in either cost or ownership, but if you were going to acquire one work of art, what would that be? Just one. And you can't go back and say, well, there are three. I can't decide. One, just one. Again, Sanford, you look very thoughtful.
I mean, I think that answer probably could change depending on what side of the bed I wake up on. But recently I've been really into De Chirico. I mean, I think even the piece behind me might even speak to some of that interest. And I don't know if I have exact work, but it would definitely be one of the Piazza series where you have the 2 and 3 point perspective compositions with the shadows and the arches and all of that interplay and the sculptures, because in any one of those, it encapsulates sort of what I've been working on, both in painting and sculpture for the last 5 years or so.
I write all of these down because at one point I'm going to have a list and maybe do a little book about this question. So, Brian?
I've been asked this question before.
You have, but not by me.
I can never come up with an answer for it. I don't think I'm comfortable with gifts. Like, I just feel like the things I acquire need to have some sort of effort put in beforehand on my part. And to have this open-ended selection process, I don't know, I can't really pinpoint it. And also, like Sanford said, I mean, it really depends on what you're working on and, how things change. I mean, that's the one thing I do love about, collecting art in this sort of modest way that I do, is that when you put things in a room together, you sort of kind of have new meaning after days of looking at them next to each other, and something else comes into the room, and then suddenly you're looking at the first thing in a new light. And I don't know. I like to stick within my reality-based selections.
Well, you're not alone. Other people have, have come up with lots of excuses, so it's okay.
Excuses.
Jennifer?
Well, I mean, I would say the Mona Lisa, because I'm kind of interested. I'm interested.
Never have I heard that as an
never. Yeah, I know, because
never.
everybody's afraid of the most iconic. I mean, what I love about the Mona Lisa is that it, in some way, it's the most populist artwork. If you ask people for one artwork they know, it's that. And it's an icon that's like separate from its physical existence. And so, yeah, I think that to own something that in a way the whole world owns already is kind of fun. But I'd own it. I'd do everything possible for the whole world to pass it around, whatever. That's what I chose a piece. Just want to say that, Brian. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm right. I'm going to write that. I'm going to write that down. And yeah, okay. And Leo.
Well, I also, a little bit hesitant, but I mean, the whole notion of possessing something, I'm sort of suspicious of. But if it was something that could spend time with and observe, I think the large glass of Duchamp would be something pretty great to be able to really look at on an extended basis. And that's sort of the beauty of having art, around you, is that you can really engage with it and have a relationship. But I think that would give me a lot to kind of ponder.
Okay. I guess I'd have to admit mine at this point.
Is that what this is all about, Arnold?
No. But I don't
we could have just asked you from the beginning.
I have been totally, I've never get the raft of the Medusa out of my mind. And I've only wanted to have a living room big enough with a ceiling high enough to put that in. And I then decided I'm doing what I don't allow anybody else to do. But if I can't have that, it's going to be Ang's great odalisque. And here I am, never doing anything earlier than 1950. And look what I want to live with. It's really crazy. All right. Maybe this is the last question. I'm trying to look ahead 10 years from now, or just towards the end of the decade. What's going to be left? I mean, what is it going to look like 10 years from now? I think they're going to be artists. Are there going to be galleries? So the museums is going to be open and serve food, and bars all over to make sure that they survive. Can you project to the end of the decade? What do you think? I mean, I just fantasize all the time. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. Sometimes, we just art barely is existing, or it's the center of the lives of many more people than it is today. Frankly, I don't know, but I
feel like
I am also frankly afraid. I'm really scared. I cut you off, Brian.
No, I feel like it's thriving. I don't know. I don't feel like when hearing you say it's barely alive.
No. I'm saying that will it be alive 10 years?
First of all, a decade is going to be like a blink. I mean, if you think about, the last 10 years, you're like, how did that pass?
I think this is also a question of my age versus yours. When you get to be 102, you're really worried about what the next week is going to be. So you're right. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I think everything we're seeing now will exist, and there'll just be additional things on top of that. People will take their interests to new places, and but I can't see. I don't know. I don't see galleries disappearing. I don't see museums disappearing. I just think more people will feel empowered to open their own galleries and museums and do it in ways that they want to do it. Anyone else?
Since we're actually close neighbors, I'm going to call you every week for reassurance. Certainly on my 103rd birthday.
But I think with any luck, like in my fantasy of the future, artists will play a much bigger role in the experience of art for people, meaning that instead of having some regular cafe at a museum, an artist is doing a project that is a cafe at a museum. Instead of figuring out how people buy tickets, an artist is kind of mediating that experience. So, I mean, if the future is as beautiful as it could be, every experience will be more touched by artists, not less. And in some ways, the definition of art will grow widely. I'm with Brian. I feel no pessimism about the future of art or artists or anything else.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. I feel like things are sort of wide open. I like the analogy to this as the Wild Wild West. I think with the advent of more and more and faster technology and open spaces and the desire for people to experience things in different ways, who knows what it's going to look like, but we all know that the artistic impetus will be there and the need and desire to experience that will be there. So the world will shape its way around that. The distributions might change and modify, but those two main points, the creative impulse and the desire to receive that will be there. So in some ways I'm optimistic. It's exciting. It's exciting to be around during this.
Leo, you almost get the last word here.
I completely agree. I feel very, excited. I don't want to go back to normal, quote unquote. I think we're in this new phase of being able to really change it, make it the way that we want. And as artists, we have a responsibility to really become leaders and help others understand, other artists, other other people involved in the community of what it could be. And, so we need some vision now. It's really some, to connect some of these pathways in ways that probably only artists can do. But we have an amazing community that really love art. And I think it will be a new hybrid, but I think we are the ones who get to shape it. So I feel really positive and ready to jump in and do whatever possible to make it amazing.
Well, I have to say, that's why I asked the four of you to be on here, and I'm really grateful that you agreed, because I love what you do, and I know a lot of other people do as well, which I'm happy about. Again, I think it's an age thing. Concerned about government, and I'd really like to, before the infrastructure bill goes through Congress, I'd like to see a protective bill about the species called artists, that they are protected and fed and secure and asked to breed so there are more artists. I think it's really important. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm optimistic along with the rest of you. I just want it to be great. And I think the four of you are going to be responsible for a lot of that happening, and I'm very grateful. And I can't thank you enough for being here. You are topping off my program of Art Speaks. I think this is about the 25th or 26th program, and it ends really well, and I appreciate it. So thank you really very much. And of course, I really want to thank all of the Phillips staff who've worked with me to make sure that these are actually heard and seen. It's for those of you who perhaps are on or listening or watching, didn't hear everything, it's recorded. So you can just go back. I don't know how you do that. We go back and you can listen to the whole thing or tell your friends, because these are four truly important artists talking about important things. And I'm very grateful. So I don't know what we're going to do next, but sometime in the fall or the winter, the next series will begin. So thank you all very, very much. Jennifer, Leo, Brian, Sanford, and Brian, I hope your exhibition turns out really great. And maybe they'll stop the armored car and let you say hi to a few folks back and forth to the museum. Thank you for being up with us at 2:00 or whatever time it is in Tokyo. Go to bed.
All right, thank you guys.
Have a wonderful summer. And to everyone in the audience, thank you for listening. Come back and listen and see us sometime in the fall. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Be well.